Welcome to our Google Hangout on climate activism and messages of interconnection. For those of you who are joining from afar, this is a class at the Presidio Graduate School called Principles of Sustainable Management. And we're having a conversation today with Lauren Wood from Peaceful Uprising, Ryan Kushner from Hero Hatchery, Paul Hawken, and myself, Amanda Ravenhill. We are the teachers of this introductory course to sustainability at Presidio. So this week we're learning about climate change and specifically focusing on messages of interconnection. So speaking about climate from a food perspective or a health perspective, really trying to connect the dots between the climate movement and other movements in order to entice people who wouldn't otherwise maybe consider themselves climate activists to get more involved. So Hero Hatchery is a great example of this, using more of a win-win solution-based messaging instead of kind of that fight, win or lose kind of messaging that activism and the climate activist movement has been using for a while. So we're going to have a conversation about that. We're going to start by hearing from Ryan about Hero Hatchery, which is a exciting project I'm also the co-founder of. And yeah, we'll start with that, and then Lauren will tell us about Peaceful Uprising and some of the work she's been doing this summer, and then we'll open it up for conversation around messages of interconnection. All right.
Great, thank you. I'm Ryan Kushner. I'm the co-founder of the Hero Hatchery, which is a new program. It's a crowdfunded fellowship for exceptional climate activists. And our fellow for this year is joining us, Lauren Wood, and we'll hear from her in a second. And the idea behind Hero Hatchery is to make the tent a lot bigger around climate activism, to use a very inclusive and positive win-win message to connect a lot of the dots and really make it clear how sort of climate affects us all and how important it is, how climate really is the first stop on the train to prosperity. And so we're doing that through crowdfunding fellowship. So we'll be supporting Lauren this year financially through public relations, so she can tell her story as emblematic of the climate movement at large, and then through a series of weekly trainings. So we'll be getting some of the greatest minds and most effective agents of change to have conversations on Google Hangouts like this every week with Lauren, so she can get better at her craft by learning from the best people about organizing, activism, frontline communities, social media, fundraising, climate science, so on and so forth. Really a broad scope of knowledge that will make Lauren more effective, and everything is completely open source and available. And so we're really hoping to draw out these lessons and train the entire movement. We are launching our crowdfunding campaign on October 7th. So right now we're continuing with what we've been doing for a couple of months, which is building a great base of support and reaching out to media and creating partnerships, and then hopefully making a really big splash using some new tools and new ways to have a huge coming out on October 7th. And then we'll raise for 5 weeks, and then the program will continue in early November. And I think it's probably good to turn it to Lauren, who is our fellow for this year. And Lauren, I think you can tell us about sort of your background with Peaceful Uprising and beyond, and sort of maybe the state of activism and what you're hoping to accomplish this year and beyond.
Sounds good. Hi, Lauren. Oh, we can't hear you.
Hey.
Hi.
Thanks, guys, for asking me to be a part of this call. Great to see you all here on pixelated screens. Yeah, so I have been spending the last about 4.5 years of my life organizing with a group called Peaceful Uprising. And we started based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, supporting a friend of mine named Tim DeChristopher, who took bold and courageous action to try and bring attention to the climate crisis in late 2008. And we've been supporting him through his work with the legal system. He was charged on 2 felonies and for interrupting an oil and gas auction. We've been supporting him through that, and then through that process had to ask ourselves some questions of, okay, what does this mean to be climate advocates? And if we're dealing with climate change, is that the root problem, or is that a symptom of a lot of other systemic root problems with our society? And it led us on a journey of asking a lot of really interesting questions and realizing that, like Ryan and Amanda have said, these issues are very much interconnected to a whole litany of other social justice, economic justice, what you might call environmental justice related issues, which are disproportionately impacting, as you guys I'm sure know, frontline communities, impacted communities who live right next to a refinery. And so in this work, I found that it's for those individuals, climate change is a very serious reality, but what's also a serious reality is disproportionate levels of cancer in their communities, or some really seriously sad things. But as Amanda was saying, you know, this is a project that's trying to look at some solutions-based approaches to looking at this, at what could be a serious crisis, as also a beautiful opportunity to really change the state of affairs in our nation as far as inequity is concerned, as well as transitioning to a sustainable future for everyone. I think at our best, we can strive to become a more equal society. What that looks like as far as in my life, and as we're talking about in a larger climate movement framework, is nebulous and confusing, and there's lots of different players that are doing incredible work all over the country in their own communities. This weekend, I just finished up, for instance, an incredible summit full of about 80 different organizers from all around the nation, both impacted and frontline community organizers, as well as what we call intermediary organizations, as well as like bigger NGOs or bigger green organizations and allied organizations. And all of those different players came together to try and have some serious conversations about what an anti-extraction-based movement really looks like. I think our country's at a point right now where all of these different various movements recognize the imminent threat of climate change and the urgency of now, and are starting to coalesce and come together and have some pretty incredible conversations that so far have been happening in their own containers. So that particular group of people this past summer led a pretty cool series of actions. We were attempting to create an umbrella or a container for people to identify with through a campaign called Fearless Summer. It was largely trying to do a lot of outreach to different organizations all around the nation to feel free to use the Fearless Summer name or hashtag to interconnect whatever actions they were taking with other actions that were happening all around the nation to resist the fossil fuel industry and prop up hopeful solutions for our future. So we had people taking actions all over the country. There was 1 week of actions in June where we had, I think it was nearing 30 or just over 30 different actions happening in the same week. And that was everything from people choosing to do community canvassing projects if those communities needed to grow their base of local support for a renewables project, or there were also, you know, like blockades actually stopping a dirty industry practice from happening. So people all around the nation were willing to come together under a banner and call themselves part of a larger movement that's willing to start addressing these things directly at their root cause. And as part of that, my organization, as well as a couple other organizations in Utah, threw a tar sands action camp. So what that means is we got about 100 to 120 people together in the remote deserts of southern Utah, my home, the places I've spent my childhood, on the muddy banks of the Colorado and the Green River, to learn about the root causes of climate change, grow our analysis of climate justice, as well as learn techniques to act together and take nonviolent direct action against some of these industries. This instance in particular, we have a campaign going against a company called U.S. Oil Sands, which is a Canadian company, ironically, that is trying to open up the first U.S. tar sands strip mining operation in the country. So we think that it's actually a very winnable campaign. They're a small corporation. It's a very economically challenging project, considering the intensive energy and the real scarcity of water resources in the second driest state in the nation on the most endangered river in America. It's a tough sell, and we decided it was a very good chance that we could actually save one of my favorite places in the world, the Tavaputs Plateau, from incredible destruction and moonscaping from tar sands. So that went really well. We had an incredible showing from all around the nation, and was really just a great example of one of many incredible shows of force from all around the nation, where people came together in solidarity with each other, not only from that community, but from the region and even national allies coming together to take action together. And we ended up actually successfully blocking road construction of a huge highway that's trying to interconnect an industrial corridor for not only tar sands, but potential oil shale and fracking on one of the most remote areas of Utah. We shut their road operation down for an entire day, and it turns out that U.S. Oil Sands lost about 13% of their stock market value that day. So it seemed to be somewhat impactful. It seemed like some people were noticing and recognizing that they're not going to come in here without a very serious fight. So to me, it's encouraging. There's a lot of people that are willing to stand up, and there's also a lot of vision for what a sustainable and just world looks like in these communities. So I guess I'll leave it at that. I know I could say way more, and maybe I already have said too much. But please feel free to ask questions or whatever.
Well, it's great to hear about your actions and kind of give a face, of many that are involved, but to the movement. Paul, do you want to start with some comments or kind of your picture of the climate movement, where it stands today?
I've been out on the farm and the fields the last 2 days, and the nice thing about it, climate has been the farthest thing from my mind. I feel like I have so much to say. I have nothing to say. I'm really interested in what Lauren shared, and it's emblematic of, I think, two things. One is that people feel helpless for good reason. It's a huge industry that controls the world. It doesn't just control energy. It controls politics in most of the major countries in the world. That would be oil and gas and coal. It just won the Australian election with Tony Abbott. And at the same time, I just think what Lawrence just shared just shows you that if you have people on the ground who have good knowledge and who are courageous, I don't mean courageous in a wild-ass way, but just courageous to speak truth to power, can have almost an immediate effect. And I think the hard thing about climate change is that climate change itself is a cumulative process, and over decades and even centuries, and it's hard to get people's attention for something like that. At the same time, it's difficult, I think, sometimes for us as activists to understand that what we do is cumulative as well, and that is to say that even defeats, of which there's been mostly, are actually part of a cumulative pattern of, I don't want to say victory, because there's no victory, but of surmounting of resistance and breaking down basically the walls of corruption. Because really what surrounds climate change is corruption. Of course there's people and desires and all that sort of stuff, but what really is the major obstacle to change is economic and political corruption. And so the only way you can get attention in such an environment is through direct action. And it will always be marginalized, and people will talk down to it and try to brush it off, and again and again and again and again. And that's the nature of activism. So it takes very special talents and people and vision and to actually pursue it. And it's I used to think writing books was delayed gratification, but actually it's nothing compared to activism. It's the ultimate delayed gratification.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for those words. Yeah, it's been really exciting launching Hero Hatchery and getting to know more of kind of what's going on in the day-to-day in the climate movement. And it's really a big part of what we're trying to do is open up the climate movement and say there's room here for everyone, and everyone can be a hero. And we are propelling Lauren and giving her as much of a boost as we can, but we don't want her to be the face of the movement. Bill McKibben wrote a great article in August about how he's been confused as the leader of the movement, and he even confuses himself sometimes. But what we really need is not even just a leaderless movement, but a leaderful movement, and thousands of people kind of becoming the heroes. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with Hero Hatchery is match heroes everywhere and really open up the movement and make it exciting and show that there's room for everyone. And obviously direct action is really important. And thanks to Peaceful Uprising in the last couple of years, the movement has started to use more of those tactics. But I really think there is room for everyone, even if you only have 5 minutes a day or an hour a week or whatever it is. We need such unprecedented change that it's going to take everyone, and so we all get to be heroes. So that's my view of things. So I'd love to hear from other people, either through comments on the YouTube page or those of us that are in the video here. Any reflections on what we're talking about, or other kind of compelling messages that you think would resonate with your communities, whether that's the community you grew up in, or your college, or your workplace? What are things that you think kind of transcend and get people kind of activated and awake? Anyone in the video first, because it's going to take a little while for the comments to come through.
Well, I think what a couple of you mentioned, in terms of the climate movement, seeming sort of abstract because of the long time scale, and you were talking about interconnectedness with food and other issues. So that makes me wonder, and Lester Brown talks about food security and the threat to our, kind of the imminent threat to our food system. So, at least people that I know personally, those types of issues, they may grasp onto that more easily than climate issues because it's something more tangible to them. So what do you see in terms of the interconnectedness with other issues? Yeah, what are your thoughts about that? Anyone, I guess.
You know, I mean, there's some incredible work going on in communities surrounding food sovereignty, and like a movement to relocalize and make bioregional a lot of food production. I see that happening all over Salt Lake. I see communities on the west side of my city, which is the traditionally, brown and black neighborhoods, tearing out their front grass strips and putting in community cooperative gardens. I think that that's happening all over America right now. And even though it's so small, I think that those very local, very time-intensive steps are going to be the things that are the real integral parts of increasingly productive movement that will hopefully spread more rapidly as we talk about it more often.
Paul, do you have any comments, being that you're on your farm right now?
I should show it. The chair is not part of the farm. Yeah, I mean the way climate itself is very hard to get traction with. It's very hard because even the scientists themselves, are loggerheads. You saw the New York Times piece, and the IPCC is trying to choose which kind of data points are more palatable. That's not science. And there's all these scientists doing that. And if you didn't see the piece, I think it was in yesterday's New York Times the day before, but Sunday or Monday, but you can look at it. And so, and then with the incredible ability to not communicate, scientists, they cannot communicate. They're incapable of communicating in a cogent, compelling way, And when they do, sometimes it is like to try to scare the pee out of people, like Jim Hansen. And so anyway, it leaves, it's kind of like a scorched earth kind of communication policy. And so absolutely, what you have to do is look at issues that people can actually identify with, are affected by, understand now and not later. And the local food, the food sovereignty movement is very much about building resiliency in the face of climate change. It doesn't have a huge impact on climate in itself, other than localization of food itself, but in the fact that it's a response like transition towns, it's a fantastic response. For activists, I think, there has to be, you have to find an opening, and to find that opening, you have to be in that place where people are. Bill McKibben has, looked for it, done it in a macro way, and burn himself out. Poor Bill, but he really is burnout. But for the rest of us, I think we have to find it, where we are, whether it's in a Pacific island or in a food desert. We're the same in that sense, because people's needs are real. But I think the most important thing is really to find that area where you have passion and fire, and it's not conceptual, and it's not abstract, and you're not just delivering data points, but you can hear emotion, you can from others, you can connect, you can be the safe place, actually, oddly enough, for information to come into, and then from that can arise activity and petitions and actions and nonviolent resistance where it's appropriate. So activism and I'm sure Lauren would agree, requires both the capacity to act fearlessly, the capacity to listen compassionately. And it's that combination that really changes people and makes them trust the activism.
Yeah. We got a comment from Aparna about water and water stresses, especially in the developing world, and how it's not often brought up in the climate movement, but is, definitely interconnected. And it's a little different, but ocean sea level rise was one of the things that sparked my interest in the climate movement. I have a home in Maine that's at 10 feet above sea level, and just hearing, some of the statistics, climate modeling is very difficult, but just knowing that that home is at risk definitely compelled me to be part of the movement. And I think also thinking about water and, the river delta that covers most of Bangladesh, I think about that a lot when I'm thinking about climate. So I think that's another thing to kind of bring it home and really have people see what it is instead of talking about 1.8 degrees Celsius rise, which, doesn't really mean much to most people. So I think the more we can contextualize it and connect it with these other movements, and have passionate leaders coming from all sides, the better successful we'll be and the more prosperous our future can be. Yeah,
and that's sort of what I think is so sort of real and strategically smart and admirable about the work that Lauren does, which is so focused on frontline communities, because over and over, having many, many conversations about climate, it's abstract, and oftentimes it comes back to health. People want to know, well, how does this affect me and human health? And so dealing at that very local basis there and making that connection between oil and health real is a great insertion point before then you get more abstract about parts per million and other. Like what sort of our job is, the hero I see missing is taking that message, just communicating it more broadly, and just making it real, spreading it far and wide, and engaging people's sense of justice and also self-preservation, which is what it's really about in the end. But it often gets lost in abstraction.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's funny because the way that question was framed, as Amanda said it, spoke to the fact that these water rights issues are not necessarily discussed that much in the climate conversation, and I think that in part is fair. I also see, being a part of the more grassroots movements, that it is something that is very central to many of the impacted and frontline communities who are fighting around the nation. Mm-hmm. People are not winning campaigns and running campaigns on, we're scared of climate change. They're running campaigns because they need water, because their water is being contaminated, because their water is at risk of not existing anymore. For instance, like I was saying, the Colorado River system is the most endangered river in America. There are 40 million people who rely upon it for food and drinking water, for showers, for agriculture, for resource extraction. And it's at a breaking point. It doesn't have anything left to give. And that's only a matter of time, a very short matter of time, before that entire drainage system is going to rethink how it has to allocate water. And at that point, when it really starts to hit water shortages for places like Las Vegas and LA and San Diego, that is when everyone starts feeling more like a frontline community. because it brings it home and it makes it very real. So I think that conversation is happening, and that's why I'm so excited about Hero Hatchery, in the sense that this is an opportunity for the national conversation to start talking about these issues the way that they are being discussed in some of the heroic communities around our nation.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great to hear that it's in those conversations. I think the place I see it missing is in a more national conversation about, like, join the movement, we need more people. It tends to be this more abstract conversation that I would love to have. I would love for Hero Hatchery to have an influence of, like, bringing some more context, and telling these stories is a great way of doing it. Great. Other comments? Other messages that resonate with you, or?
Well, I want to say something just about actions. Every action is a meme. Every action is like I don't know, it's like a song, and once you've heard a song or sang a song, it's easier to remember it and to sing it again. And so when you're in the action, it's like, it seems maybe small, or it's just this road or this highway or that, company or that fence. You've changed yourself to your gate. But the fact is that the way movements spread is by copying. I mean, we're just people. But also, it's not just copying or imitating, but we're emboldened by other people's courage and other people's actions. And so they grow that way. They grow by that networking. And so a single direct action or a series of direct actions on a single issue can have cascading effects that are unbeknownst to those people who are doing the action. And there's no reason to know except it's true. And so I think, again, I keep going back to this thing about, feeling maybe powerless or not so powerful in the face of something so gigantic and huge. And I'm just going back to the idea that it's a lot more powerful than we can understand in real time.
Yeah.
I think. We talk a lot in my particular community about that idea that we don't necessarily have all of the answers. We might very well make mistakes as we're going through this work, but the point is a bicycle has to have propulsion forward for you to not fall over on it. So if a movement's going to have any traction, you have to be able to actually try something out and keep moving forward on it, even if you're not sure of the direction. To act as you walk and to question as you walk is I think the only way we're ever going to create that change.
And I can speak from experience that it is contagious. Like Paul was saying, it is a meme, and you never know what the effects are. I was sort of convinced to go to DC to be part of the Keystone XL protests by someone very near and dear to me, and I'd never really done anything like that. And it was amazing, and it was a high, and I met incredible people. And here's some photos of us. It's the SWAT team that's arresting us. A little overshoot. And
every couple should be arrested by a SWAT team.
Yeah, I think it's like if you're gonna get married, you should travel together and get arrested together. Yeah, then you're good. And that experience absolutely in every way led to the creation of the Hero Hatchery, and just wanting to give that opportunity to other people, and to have that sense of this is the right fight, and we're doing it in a smart way, and it feels good, and this is where the good people are. And that's what I feel like. That was my inspiration, and that's sort of my need through Hero Hatchery is to communicate that. So by pulling in great activists, and great minds, sort of establish the meme of this is sort of where it's happening. One of our advisors, Ty Cashman, said something which just rings through my head all the time. And someone's asking him sort of about climate and sort of what motivates him. And he said that he cares about a lot of things, many issues. He's a very compassionate, involved individual. But through studying and reading and thinking, he realized that unless we get this climate thing under wraps, then sort of nothing else matters. All the threads of everything else sort of get undone. So he's become, monocularly focused on climate, and so that really helps to push me forward. And being around people like him helps push me forward.
From Nicole, thanks, Ryan. That she's working on a project with Eco America. She's doing interviews and writing case studies about climate heroes and faith-based communities, but not so much about the heroes, but about the actions and how others can replicate them. But she's struggling to find ways to make sure that the case studies are written in a way that motivates people to action. So she's wondering if any of us have tips or examples of things that we think really inspire.
Just to clarify, specifically from faith-based communities?
I think just in general, kind of how do you write a case study or ensure that kind of the true message is coming through that would actually resonate and then inspire the audience to take that next step?
How do you get people off the couch?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a question I've been asking for 4.5 years, which is not that long considering the amount of time that I know a lot of other activists have been asking that question. But I think, I think telling an authentic story, getting someone to speak in a place where they're willing to actually be vulnerable, and not necessarily defensive about the way that they're communicating something is really important. I know that's something we have to practice in my community and in communities where we're trying to do this storytelling is getting people to speak from their heart, which is something that I think a lot of us try to not do as much. And I think it's actually cool that your particular project is focusing case studies on faith-based action and activism, because I feel like a lot of those communities that I've been involved with tend to be more willing to be honest with their hearts. For instance, I've done a lot of work with Unitarians in our community, and they're pretty incredible people. Some people in Peaceful Uprising say my friend Joan got arrested sitting in the Department of the Interior, and because of her faith, she sang the whole time that she was in the department, just peacefully occupying it, and then her and a bunch of other people sang for 7 hours while they were held in a detention center in DC, and that was part of her faith. And it was through that singing and through that practice that she was able to be so honest in the way that she tells that story now. And she tells that story honestly because of the passion that she has for the climate justice movement and her want for a better future for her grandchildren. So, yeah, I think that's what I think. I think you have to make people be willing to be vulnerable.
From my experience with the religious community, I have found if they're motivated by doing God's work. So if we stress to them in their language and from their angle that this is a really valuable thing to God, whether we believe in that or not, I think that it stirs action in them, because that's ultimately what they serve, their purpose. How we infiltrate into those settings, or find those people that overlap, that understand the value of the work, but also have a platform to say this is God's work. I think that is key in motivating the faith community, is targeting those leaders that really get it and letting them speak the language.
Speaking of, we just had a comment. Gabriel here wrote a quote from the Dalai Lama that says, "In the early part of my life, not knowing the enormity of the issue, then gradually, as I had my own experiences and meeting with specialists on the environment, it's a very serious matter." And then Gabriel writes that he is being actively patient. He says, "We must create respectful and honest personal experiences for our global community." So it's another comment in there. We only have 5 minutes left, so I'd like to get some kind of more closing remarks and ways to continue to be involved. We also have an online discussion on this topic, and Lester Brown book, Full Planet, Empty Plates, which does a really good job at talking about all the different food challenges that are upon us and how those are related to climate. So we'll continue this discussion, but I'd love to hear from Ryan, Lauren, and Paul, in whatever order, just some closing thoughts on kind of the movement, interconnection, and how to get more involved.
I'm thinking right now about something that Lauren mentioned, which was sort of the intergenerational aspect of climate change. Mm-hmm. And wow, that just does not land. I talked to my brother and sister and my parents, and that's sort of my pitch. Oh, like, Ashley, you just had a new child. Congratulations. Like, let's think about that, the world that child will inhabit. And people's lives are full of, such reality of day-to-day things. And I feel like that's winning. If we can figure out how to make that message real, and to make when you think about your children, you think about the climate that they're going to live in. Just that sort of simple 1 and 1 equals 2. That's something it's hard to get. And I feel like at Hero Hatchery, we're searching for memes. We're searching for what's going to land for different audiences, and so that's a challenge. And then in terms of staying in touch, Hero Hatchery is 100% grassroots. So there's many, many ways to get involved. If you're inspired, just write me an email, Ryan at Hero Hatchery, or Ryan Kushner at gmail.com is best. And the website is herohatchery.org.
Great. Paula, Lauren?
Well, I remember being at town hall, sitting on stage with His Holiness the Dalai Lama about either 9 years ago. And it was about the environment, and I spoke about climate change. And what I said on stage was that we are there because the people have been made homeless, Tibetans, and did not seek revenge. And how, but I said, it's good that we should talk about this in front of Tibetans, I said, because we're all going to be homeless in this century. And not homeless in the sense of place, the actual place, but that we won't recognize our homes, because the fauna and the flora will change and the weather patterns will change. And at that time, His Holiness said, "Oh, no, why are you so gloomy? Don't be so gloomy." And he really didn't understand it at all, and to be honest. And so he has really gone through this change, and I call that out only because that's the way people change. Just like it doesn't matter whether they're the Dalai Lama or they're the farmer next door. they change through the constancy of friends, of information, and experiences. And you know, we don't have any control over outcomes. We only have control over our intentions and the purity of our actions. And then the rest we just have to let go. You know, there's no point in the, you know, in that. And the point is to really have faith in humanity. That humanity does change, even if it's slow. Or too slow, or you think somebody should know and they don't, or somebody should be aware and they're not yet, but it's just the way it is. And it's a fairly, I would say, you know, and there's two ways of looking at it. You know, people put very momentous words to it, and, you know, the balance of life on Earth depends on what you do. I think that's pretty onerous, really, to say, you know. And I think, again, going back to, like what Ryan was saying, going back to issues that are timely and about the home, about family, about community, about livelihood, about God. And I talk about God all the time in my speeches, not throughout, but I'm certainly not afraid to use that word. And I define it for myself, and I say God is all of life and its complexity, mystery, and, you know, and I'm not afraid to talk about it all. And I was just in Brazil and Mexico, very Catholic countries, and I can tell you it really, really helps to, you know, and I thank you, Angela, but it really helps to bring in the spiritual and to not. I'm Buddhist, you know, we don't have God, we don't have monotheism in Buddhism. It doesn't matter. What we have is profound respect for people who have a spiritual path. And it doesn't matter which it is. And so I wouldn't do it to be manipulative in any way or to pull strings, but I would certainly do it as a way of offering oneself to, you know, that which is sacred. You know, and I think it's very effective, people. It really opens them in a way that facts will never open.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lauren?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, what Paul is saying is very true. I think that, you know, what our movement needs right now is a little bit more soul and a little bit more love. We've been trying science for a while, and it's very compelling to a lot of us, and it isn't enough. You know, even if you're a scientist, you still have to connect to something a lot deeper than that. I know when I'm in the middle of a river canyon in the middle of nowhere, I feel like I'm connected to something much deeper than the reality of exactly how old those rock layers are, etc. And I also just wanted to say, I think that something my friend Tim said really struck me, and it isn't meant to be depressing, but he said, you know, the reality is we are already right now seeing the effects of a changing climate on our planet. We are right now in the beginning of something that, at least to some extent, can't be stopped entirely. It can definitely be curbed and mitigated, and we should continue to do a lot to bring down our carbon emissions. And that is the worthy fight of our age. But the reality is we're not going to save ourselves from from climate change. But what we are going to do is save our humanity in the process of a changing world. So that's why I'm an activist. Not to save the world from climate change, but to save us from ourselves and to create that better future. So, anyways.
Thanks, Lauren. All right, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks for those of you who are watching the video. And I look forward to continuing this discussion in our forum. I think my closing words are, stay in touch with Hero Hatchery. We're going to be highlighting a lot of other organizations in the work that we do like I said, just opening it up so everyone can feel, there's like the Moms for Climate groups or the cyclists or whoever it is, giving a lot of opportunities to get involved in a way that resonates with you. So let me know if you want to get involved or just go to our website, and I'll be inviting everyone to our launch party on October 6th. So save the date for that. And I think that's it. Thank you all for joining, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you for convening me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. It was nice to meet you all.
Bye.